Hey everybody, welcome back to GR Research, where we are finally back to doing some more speaker upgrades. Whew! Now, as you can see, we've had a lot of stuff come in this last week. I've got pretty nice ATC SCM19, whatever it is, Model 19. Dyne Audio Anniversary 40, or Special 40 edition. We have a KEF Q150 that's come in. We got an older model back here, a big Macintosh speaker. It's one of the models that had the triple tweeters on it. We got to see what that's all about. But we're not going to talk about any of those just yet. Today we're going to talk about this little jewel. It's kind of disassembled, so bear with me. It is the new little Sony CS5. And there's already lots of them out there. They're really popular, and the guys at all the little internet review sites or YouTube groups or review guys, they're singing some praises about this little thing, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, for almost no money, this thing has the building blocks of being a really high-end speaker. I mean, really nice. Let's look at what this thing did from the factory, how it measured and what's inside and all that good stuff. Have to get the reading glasses out. So let's start with the measurements. Let's look at what it did. Look at the frequency response on axis. You'll see there's a little choppiness there. It's not perfect. There's a little choppiness. There is a pretty good dipped area at 3 kHz and a pretty good little peak at 1.1 kHz. So right there at 1000 Hertz, bad place for a peak. It's there. And if we look at the spectral decay, there's some stored energy right there at that peak. So it's got that going on. And it's got some cabinet resonances going on. It's pretty lightly constructed. And in the impedance curve, which is pretty smooth, it dips to only 5.1 ohms. It's a nice balanced load. We see a couple of resonances down at the tuning frequency of the port and one a little below, and some of that could be caused by a little bit of the cavity resonances of the panels or an internal resonance, but not too bad. Now if we look at the horizontal off axis, we see it drops off normally, not bad. And if you look at the vertical off axis, you'll see a little bit of cancellation taking place at the crossover points between this driver, this lower tweeter, and the woofer, but not bad. And you'll also see some cancellation between this tweeter and the smaller tweeter at the upper frequency range, where as you start moving up in distance, the time arrival between one versus the other starts causing cancellation. So it knocks out some of that openness. Some of those spatial cues at the top end are only within the room, within this plane here. As you go up or down, they're starting to cancel each other out. So there's a few issues with it from the factory. And the crossover parts that come from the factory are not that bad for the money spent. At least all three of the capacitors are polycaps. That's great. And the one on the little tweeter, it's less than 1 microfarad. It's like 0.86 microfarad. So it's not allowed to play down very low. The two inductors that are on the tweeters are air core, but it does have a little iron core inductor on the woofer, and it does have sandcast resistors. It's got really thin, cheesy wiring on it, probably a 19 gauge wire or something maybe. So not much going on there. Some little binding posts that look nice on the outside. They definitely have some push-on connectors on them and stuff. So, you know, exactly what you'd kind of expect at this price point. But keep in mind, this price point is not very much. This thing is as low as $120 a pair. Some not $119 a pair advertised in some places. So we're talking a speaker that's no money. And for a speaker that's no money, these are pretty nice little drivers. And if you look at it as a small tweeter and a small mid and a woofer, and you go at it from the crossover standpoint of controlling it that way, it turns out much better than trying to use it as a tweeter, super tweeter. It's really not much of a tweeter, super tweeter. Nice little beauty ring on the little woofer here. It is a stamped steel frame, of course. I mean, at these price points, what do you expect? They have to make these things for absolutely nothing, and I'm sure they did. But the cone material is pretty nice on this. This is a well-dampened cone. It behaves pretty well other than that big resonance at 1 kHz. So, that being said, is it a good candidate for an upgrade? What can be done with this thing? Is it one of those speakers with really good bones? I think it is. It has all the good basics there, just screaming for a few fixes and some better quality parts. This could be a little giant killer. So I went to work on this thing, and here's what happened. I designed a new crossover that was designed a little differently than the way they went at it. I used a crossover where I'm basically crossing the woofer over to the upper tweeter, and I'm using the mid in what's called a filler driver situation. So let's look at the new frequency response that individually shows each driver. So we're looking at the crossover version, basically. And I only needed 2 parts on the woofer to give it a nice roll off, but I had to go in and put these 3 parts on there as a notch filter and get rid of that big nasty resonance, that hump at 1 kHz. So that's gone. So we've got a roll off here that is picture perfect smooth. You couldn't ask for a roll off that looks any better than this. And then you got the upper tweeter that rolls off okay. I mean, it's not going to play down real low, but it doesn't have to. So basically you have the upper tweeter and you have the woofer crossing like this, and they're crossing over each other at a point where they're about 15 dB down. And then we're letting this driver come in at a lower output level, but it's acting as a filler driver. So it's filling that middle and bringing the frequency response up to what's really a pretty flat response. On axis, this is better than plus or minus 1 dB from one end to the other. And if we look at 10 degrees off axis, this is really impressive. 10 degrees off axis, this thing is plus or minus 0.8 dB. I mean, this thing is ruler flat smooth. Let's look at the spectral decay. We'll notice that that ridge line and that resonance that was at 1K, it's gone. This is one of the smoothest spectral decays that you'll see on most speakers. I mean, this is beyond good. This is excellent. There's very little stored energy left in the drivers. I mean, they're playing it and stopping, so that's awesome. And then if you look at the horizontal off axis, it looks pretty good. The little tweeter is so small that it has really good dispersion, so as you move left or right, you're really not losing a whole lot. It's still really smooth in both directions, so great in that regard. Now here's the really impressive part. I mean, this is impressive. Look at the vertical off axis, and when I say vertical off axis, I mean we're looking at the first line in red. It's directly in line with the top tweeter, and then we're moving up 4 inches per measurement at 1 meter. So we're looking at it at the extreme off axis going up. So we're thinking, what does the reflection from the ceiling look like? And that's the biggest reflection point in your room. So that vertical off axis, easily one of the most important measurements that you really want to look at. And if you look at this thing, it is dead flat smooth all the way across. So these drivers are staying in phase. As you move up, it's still a flat line. This is probably one of the most impressive vertical off axis measurements that I've taken on any speaker. It looks great. The impedance looks a little differently because of what we're doing to it this way, but it's still just as easy of a load as it was, and man, does this thing measure well. So not only does it measure well, but we're going to put some really good quality parts in the path instead of the little cheesy stuff that came on it. So we got good quality polycap and good quality air core inductor on the woofer circuit. We've got equal good quality parts there in the notch filter. We're getting that out of it. Beautiful woofer curve. The lower tweeter, which is acting as a mid in this little waveguide, there's just 3 parts here. One's a sonic cap, one little link resistor there in line with this inductor. That's it. There's not a lot of parts there. Same goes for the little tweeter up top. It's also second order with 1 resistor to bring the levels down to balance. It's also a sonic cap. So we've got, in this kit, we've got 4 sonocaps. We've got 8 inductors. We've got all new wiring. This is 16 gauge high purity wire in polyethylene. So we got good quality wire, and we're going to replace the cheesy binding posts with a set of tube connectors. So we get 4 tube connectors and the male connectors. And if you want, you can remove these old ones and drill these out and insert the tube connectors right into this old plate, which screws right onto the back. So it couldn't get any easier than that. I mean, that's easy. Now, parts are going to be a little difficult to get into this little box because this box, it's not real big. So what I recommend is building out the networks on their own boards, and I would mount the 2 tweeter networks together on the back wall, which would be right here, right above the binding posts, or right above where the tube connectors are going to go, and right below the port. So you got this much area right here. That's where I would mount these parts. And then in the floor of the cabinet, right there at the very back, that's where you'll mount the network for the woofer. So you got two little cards, basically 2 little pieces of anything you want to mount them on. Cut a little piece of MDF, a little piece of plywood, something thin is better. Mount those parts on it, and you're going to mount this one on the floor. You're going to mount those on the back wall. Be sure that when you mount those on the floor that the magnet for the woofer is not hitting it. You want it to still be above it, not touching it or not right over it. So watch your orientations on how you place it in there. Now, I'm going to also throw in something I never do. This cabinet, it needs some help. It really needs some help. But it doesn't need a full sheet of no-res. A full sheet of no-res would do 4 of these things. So I've been cutting no-res sheets, which is a 24 by 27 inch sheet. I've been cutting them into 4 sections, and to get the dimensional weight down for all the orders that we ship overseas. All you European guys and stuff, and all you guys over in Malaysia, Singapore, and Australia, and a couple other countries over there that keep ordering the no-res. We chop it up in pieces for you guys to get the dimensional weight down so it fits in a smaller box. Since I'm already cutting some of that up anyway, I'm gonna include in this kit 1/2 of a sheet of no-res and cut the price in half so that we can fix that problem of the cabinet wall resin. And this is fairly thin. This is probably less than or right around 1/2 inch thick, so it needs the no-res. So I'm going to throw that in, and you get all these parts, and it's $285 for everything. And I know you're thinking, wow, $285, but that's more than the speakers cost. I can get the speakers for $120. Yes, that's true. But for the total of all the upgrade parts and the speaker, you're at $405 plus some shipping. And that's not very much money for a speaker that's going to be loaded with some of the best parts, the best connectors, some of the best wire, all good quality parts. Nice solid cabinet with the no-res in it, good drivers, and you're at $405 for everything plus some shipping. And these may embarrass some of these more expensive speakers over here. We'll wait and see. We'll see what I can do with these. Next week or so, I'll shoot some video on these models, and we'll look and see how they measure and what can be done with them. And back to some good speaker upgrades. And we still got some cable stuff to do, and that's coming too. I know I really hit those cable deals pretty hard, but we're setting up some listing comparisons where we're going to video some blind listing comparisons. That's coming up, so that's going to be fun. That's going to require a little setup and a little help and some time, and right now I've had no time. We've been covered up to here lately, and we're doing all we can to get product out the door as fast as we can, and dealing with not being able to get raw materials in as fast as we'd like to, but we're getting on top of it. And so that's it for this week. I appreciate you guys. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching.